Good morning, people from Yonkers Voice. As promised, we here today with a man that I call a fountain of knowledge, Professor Joseph Diaferia. Did I say the name correct?
You certainly did, thank you.
I've been practicing this for a few days now. You know, my accent is so thick that...
It's okay, I've been practicing my name also.
You've been doing it for how long? For how long?
Let's not even go there. But if it's any consolation, I've been practicing the pronunciation of my name too. So you did fine.
So I've been talking with the professor for many years. Actually, we were trying to have an interview years back. It didn't happen, but it's happening now. And it's happening now because of many things that we are hearing out there in the world. And I think you can explain, because I see lots of people talking about certain subjects without actually understanding the root cause and the subject, which is immigration. Legal, illegal, how we classify them, why people walk thousands of miles to get to the country of the free. Sir, take the stage.
Okay, well, first, thank you, Rue, and thank you, Yonkers Voice, for this opportunity. I appreciate it. I'm very happy to be here this morning. Yes, the migrant crisis, sadly, is referred to contemptuously in some circles as an invasion. And this is not an invasion. It is a human hemorrhage of refugees. And what migrants or refugees, I will not call them invaders myself, but what they are fleeing are the conditions that are imposed upon their countries of origin by U.S. foreign policy. And I tried to make light of this 12 years ago when I ran for Congress, that our foreign policy, U.S. foreign policy, is the cause. It is the cause, and really before there can be a well-meaning and informed national discussion around the issue of immigration, there has to be a serious, and I do mean a serious, examination of our foreign policy. Now, that's easier said than done, because so much of what, I don't even want to say our government as such, but more specifically our national security apparatus, and I'm referring to the military, the CIA, the NSA, along with other foreign countries, primarily the U.S., what they are doing in Latin America, certainly in other places too, the Middle East, West Africa, but we'll focus on Latin America right now, is largely unknown to the American public. That, for example, governments have been overthrown, political leaders assassinated outright. The moment any political or social formation emerges in Latin America that seeks to do something for the majority population, it has been dealt with violently by our government, or again, let me define it more narrowly, our national security apparatus, our CIA in particular. And this is to maintain a favorable investment climate in Latin America. And I referred a moment ago to political leaders who've been assassinated. Salvador Allende on Chile, September the 11th, 1973. And Richard Nixon all but admitted that he ordered this man dead. And he was democratically elected, not radical by any means or by any description, but there is a prime example of a political movement or an election of a government that sought to do something for the majority population. It put American or U.S. and U.S. primarily commercial interests in jeopardy, and that's why he was eliminated. And then you had a death squad economy. You had that deranged murder machine of Augusto Pinochet that followed. So, and this is quite typical. Maybe the example of Allende stands out because here was somebody who was essentially ordered killed by a U.S. president, Richard Nixon. And we all know Richard Nixon, he's not above something like that. Escalating the bombing of Southeast Asia, as he did, with a savagery that made Lyndon Johnson look mild. But we've seen that over and over again that, again, when people try to take control of their countries, their economies, to measure their own wealth, their own prosperity, along comes the CIA, and these political movements are dealt with violently, and the result, death-squad economies. There was something at Fort Benning, and I believe the name of Fort Benning has been changed to Fort Moore. I mean, you know,
yes.
Okay, if you, one of your viewers could correct me up, but you have a training institute, for lack of a better characterization, called the School of the Americas, which around 2000 or so, its name was changed to the Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Cooperation, and that is how the military, that's how the Pentagon responded to calls to close the institute down. But this is where Latin American military personnel are sent by their governments, of course on the request of the United States, where they are trained in the art of torture and political assassination to maintain that favorable investment climate. And El Mozote, in December of 1981, 800 civilians were massacred by graduates of the School of the Americas. Oscar Romero, March 1980, a bishop in San Salvador, murdered at the pulpit as he was saying Mass. And he was targeted because he was speaking out against the very injustices that people in Latin America are fleeing. And yes, it does it does seem quite an irony that these refugees, and that's what I will call them, refugees, are fleeing to the very country whose government is imposing these conditions upon their.
So no, finish your sentence.
Sure. No, I have.
Oh, so they are really not invading United States.
No, sir.
As some people are saying.
No,
they are
sir.
escaping their country for a situation that was inflicted by United States.
Exactly. I mean, it's the U.S. that is invading. If the CIA goes into one or another country and overthrows its government or foments political chaos or what have you, that is no less an invasion than if the United States sends a full army of 400,000 troops, guns blazing. One approach is covert, the other is overt, but it's still an invasion. But then, of course, we've seen invasions of Latin American countries, directly, U.S. troops, thousands at a time. Panama, December 20th, 1989. Now, of course, the reason was that was proffered to the American people, Noriega, drug trafficking and all that sort of thing, which
Go ahead.
Which may very well have held true.
But something that we always knew was happening.
Something that we knew was happening. And as far as drug trafficking, I mean, the CIA has been involved in drug trafficking. Incidentally, I mean, lest this sound like licentious conspiracy theory, it's a matter of historical record. I mean, this goes back to the OSS in Southeast Asia, Marseille, France, when it was under the direction of Allen Dulles, who later became CIA director until Kennedy fired him. But, I mean, it is our CIA, and to a lesser extent, our military that has been involved in drug trafficking. So to claim or even to frame Noriega was not difficult to do. But the actual reason he was taken down, well, there were a few reasons, not least of which that the U.S. at the time was looking to abrogate the Carter-Torrijos Treaty of 1977, which gave the canal, which did eventually happen, that the canal was given to Panama, and I don't say given back to Panama because Panama had not owned it up to that point, but the treaty was stipulated in such a way that the canal would be given to Panama provided that Panama was able to defend it militarily. So by the U.S. going in and smashing the PDF, the Panamanian Defense Forces, that it was no longer able to uphold its end of the treaty, and that was the strategy. But even more significant, I mean, aside from the Carter-Torrijos Treaty of 1977-78, it was to underscore for all of Latin America, or to all of Latin America, that this was the fate that awaited any country that failed to obey U.S. authority. And sure enough, only months later, the people of Nicaragua elected Violeta Chamorro to the presidency, not because the people of Nicaragua thought that she was so wonderful or because they thought that the Sandinista regime was so terrible, because the Sandinistas, after all, they were addressing the needs of the poor, the majority population. But the U.S. was waging a war, a campaign of terror against the Nicaraguan people. The Contras, the death squads, again, trained at the School of the Americas. They wanted that to stop. So it was a capitulation to American pressure, U.S. pressure, and not for fear that the Soviet Union or Russia was somehow encroaching upon that region. No, these are the rationales that are proffered to the American people by our government. And if I can speak to that, thank you very much, that Americans know so little, and I don't mean that to sound arrogant, again, I to your viewers, but that we really know that the American people know so little of what their government is doing, actually speaks to the very decency of the American people. We are good people. Your viewers out there, we are good people. And we get very angry when we see evil people doing evil things. And they know we will take action. If even a significant minority of the American people knew of the School of the Americas and the death squad economies, not to mention the sweatshop economies that have been created, as is true of Southeast Asia, Indonesia. I mean, a million people were killed in 1965 by the CIA. Most Americans are unaware of this. And again, it's not a function of willful ignorance. It is the result of misinformation, disinformation, subterfuge, disingenuous reportage, that Americans have a very limited picture. And again, it speaks to the very goodness of the American people, because we would take action. We are, after all, a society, thank you for the water incidentally, we are a society that is ruled by about 500 or so billionaires. And there are 340 million of us, and they know, those in power know, and I'm not referring to the government as such, I'm talking about any elite class. They know that they are standing on our shoulders. And if this great mass of people begins to shrug and rumble, it's going to get very wobbly up there. So, excuse me.
But Professor, let's get back to those thousands of people that are walking from their homeland, thousands of miles, buses on top of the trains to get to Mexico, to get entrance into the United States.
Sure.
A lot of the Americans are saying, we have nothing against immigration, we just want you to come in legally, through the big door, through that huge wall that Mexico was going to pay for it, they never did. Okay. So what do we have to tell those people? Because I think that those comments are made based on ignorance, because they don't understand that no one is going to walk thousands of miles with the kids and families if there was another way in.
Right, and they wouldn't be doing so either just to bring drugs or, crime or weapons or what have you. No, I mean, statistically, as we know, most violent crime that is committed by Americans, right, those who were born here. But first of all, one often hears, well, my grandparents came here legally, they came in, but I mean, how do we know that? I mean, we spoke about that when I arrived a few minutes ago, that my grandparents came to this country from Italy. Let me clarify, my paternal grandparents came to this country from Italy about 100 years ago. Now, I can't speak for how legally or illegally or what the circumstances of their departure from Italy to the United States. I mean, one could have argued at the time that they were here illegally. I don't know. I'm not making that claim necessarily. But as far as the legality, what they are fleeing are illegal, immoral actions. Crimes literally committed by, once again, our national security apparatus, the CIA in particular. death squad economies and the attendant poverty and hardship. And one might say, well, why don't they stay in their countries of origin and develop their economies and develop their political systems and do what they need to do? They would probably want to do that. And it would be great if they could. But again, the moment any kind of social or political movement or formation emerges that tries to bring economic democracy, never mind political or procedural democracy, but economic democracy, it is systematically smashed by the U.S. military. And that incidentally is the very reason the School of the Americas, renamed of course, the reason it exists.
Now, Professor, to those that are out there afraid that immigrants, fear-mongering by somebody specific, that they are coming into the United States and eating our dogs and cats and stealing our jobs, do you know of any American that lost a job in California picking up fruits because of the immigrants? How many Americans are out there?
No. They're taking jobs that U.S.-born Americans would not want anyway, and and as far as house pets being consumed by Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, I think that's just a lot of schizophrenic nonsense, being proffered by an individual who wants to, return to the White House because he has it in his foolish mind that he actually won in 2020. I mean, let's not go.
Did you win? I'm going to ask you the $1,000 question that's been asked. Did you win 2020?
Trump? No, he lost fair and square, period.
No two ways about it?
No two ways about it, no. I mean, no more so than, I'm trying to think of an analogy or a parallel, but the only one that springs to mind, if back in, say, 2017, 2018, if Rob Astorino was, if he were to claim that he was the rightful winner of the 2017 election for county executive, I mean, that would make, Trump's claim makes no more sense than that would have made. And again, Astorino, to my knowledge, made no such claim, but it was the only analogy that sprang to mind, so I used that. But I mean, Trump lost.
Now, we know why Trump is saying that he won, but I don't know why all those around his circle, the inner circle, the vice president for if he wins, and others are refusing to answer that question.
Yeah, no. Well, that could be for any number of reasons. Some of them might even believe that he was the rightful winner, but what's amazing too is that so much of that claim is predicated on the notion, the fiction, I should say, that illegal immigrants voted in mass numbers. Voter fraud is extremely rare. Legend to the contrary is extremely rare. Electoral fraud, that's another matter, where political parties, governments, for example, manipulate numbers from behind the scenes. That has happened a few times, and of course we all know what happened in 2000, but we could look at, for example, in 1948, when Lyndon Johnson was elected to the Senate, to the U.S. Senate from the state of Texas, that there was some manipulation of numbers in the Democratic primary. I mean, it does happen. It does happen, but voter fraud is extremely rare. And let me, if I may, for your audience, differentiate voter fraud. A voter or a group of voters voting under false pretenses. For example, if I were to vote here in Yonkers and then travel, say, to Jersey City and cast a vote for president and journey, then double back to Connecticut and vote in a third. I mean, that would be an example, maybe an extreme example of voter fraud. I know that's funny. Or, pretending to be someone else or using a false name, or things like that. That is extremely rare. So, and incidentally, you have a lot of voter suppression tactics being employed, to address a virtually non-existent problem. I mean, it's just not happening other than perhaps in Donald Trump's vivid imagination that people who should not be voting are voting. And then again, who could claim, or rather, excuse me, who could blame a refugee from, say, Guatemala or El Salvador for wanting to vote in the U.S. election, because after all, it is U.S. policy that caused him to flee his country of origin to begin with. But that's, you know, I'm speaking philosophically now, but I mean that is...
Now,
that
Professor,
is
I have to interject, and I have to give a shout out to Dos Marias 200 New Main Street, right here in Yonkers, New York. Right at the corner of New Main Street, and is that Yonkers Avenue?
That's Neperham.
Neperham, right at the corner. New Main Street and Neperham. This is a great place for Mexican food, a great place to come and mix and mingle, make new friends. If you haven't been here, guess what, guys? It's time to be here. Every day, excluding Mondays, day off Mondays.
Okay.
But they need a break too.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And yes, I absolutely second that. I was here a function that I believe Jose Alvarado hosted, and yes, on that occasion, it was, I want to say about a year ago, possibly a little more, but yes, the food here is delicious.
It's delicious.
Yes, so,
the music, the ambiance,
yes,
top. So you got to come down and check it out. Support our local business with actions, not words.
Yes,
We all
absolutely.
talk about, you know, we got to support it, we got to do this, goes no further than the words that we're speaking. Actions is what really counts.
yes.
As you know, we are live.
Yes.
And people are asking questions.
Okay.
And a lot of people know you, Professor.
Oh my goodness.
Okay? That's a good thing or bad thing? I think it's
Better,
a good
better
thing.
ask them.
Okay. Professor, this is what they're asking. Situation in Israel, Gaza, Lebanon, Iran nowadays. A lot of people in America, they formulate their opinion about Israel based on what United States government tells them
Sure.
to do. Okay, they will spit out a few things, this is what's going on, and people formulate based on that. Not based on really history, background, what happened. Israel was founded in 1948. What is your take on that situation that is going on now?
Okay,
Where thousands have
the inevitable question is, does Israel have a right to exist? Now, I mean, to the extent that right to exist even exists in international law, they do. But of course, you know, so do the Palestinians. However, the U.S., for its part, has used Israel as a constabulary force, a constabulary entity, or an attack dog, if you will. And this is, and of course, we needn't speculate, first of all. I mean, even going back to when David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, just publicly stated that, you know, this is the role that Israel is willing to assume for the West. He didn't need to mention the United States per se. But what's really problematic is that there's this notion that it is because of the so-called disproportionate political power of Jewish people in the United States that the U.S. has to support Israel. And that's a very dangerous premise, because what happens then is that American Jews are then blamed for these unpopular decisions. And you know, so it's most, well, let me speak to the Israeli population first of all. I mean, this is something that is also overlooked. They have, there exists a very large peace movement within Israel, and that is among the Jewish population. Even if it's not a majority per se, it is still a very significant minority. So you have Israeli citizens themselves who are, in many instances, very critical of their own government. I mean, per capita, it could be argued that theirs is a larger peace movement than ours here in the U.S. But ultimately, you know, and we obviously don't have to like Hamas, and you know, and we don't. And you know, they're. Let me just get back on track here. The problem is the U.S. really, because it has everything to do with that oil-rich Middle East. And the U.S. has had its tentacles in the Middle East since 1949, when the U.S. went and overthrew the Syrian government, which is another piece of history with which most Americans are not aware. And let me just add some parenthetical trivia there. The CIA case officer who was placed in charge of the overthrow of the Syrian government in 1949 was none other than Miles Copeland. And if anybody knows, or if anybody is familiar with a band known as the Police, okay, pretty famous band, the drummer, Stuart Copeland, he's the son of Aaron Copeland. Anyway, I like to throw that out, just again for the sake of trivia. But I mean, it's U.S. involvement in that region is not a new phenomenon. And it's really, it all redounds to the oil and to a lesser extent the natural gas in that region that the Western corporations want control over. And it is to the benefit of the elite class, to which I keep making reference, that so much chaos exists. And in the Palestinians, the Israeli citizens, Jewish and non-Jewish alike, I mean, they're the ones who are the victims of Western policy ultimately.
What about the Palestinian people, the innocent lives that have died?
Yes, I mean, it's by any objective standard, the Israeli response has been out of all proportion. I mean, what happened on October 7th of last year, indeed, it was a tragedy. Of course,
no one can condone that.
Of course not. No, I mean, obviously not. But everybody is suffering as a result. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. I might wonder, given the level of sophistication of Israeli intelligence, how they did not know that this was about to happen. But I don't want to speculate too much. But I think, maybe it is a serious question. I mean, how did the Israelis not know that this terrible thing was about to happen? I mean, and one could ask similarly with regard to 9/11, and how, I mean, I've heard it argued that the official story, and I'm not going to get into 9/11, but that the official story of 9/11 is, among other things, a grievous insult to the U.S. military. That, I mean, how could this level of incompetence just overwhelm our intelligence establishment? So I might, not here and now, but let me rephrase, one could pose a similar question with regard to Israeli intelligence. How was it not known that this was about to happen? But of course, it was terrible.
So, Professor, Israel is known for one of the best intelligence services in the world.
Yes.
But they had no idea about October 7th.
Yeah, well, I would
I
would pose that as a question.
As a question.
Yeah, did they know? Did they not know? I mean, how?
But many are saying or suggesting, not I'm just posing the
Right,
question.
no.
Many are suggesting that Israel is using what happened on October 7th to eliminate the most amount of people from the opposite side. Is that a possibility, sir?
Well, it's a possibility, but I think ultimately it's the U.S. that's the problem there, and the U.S. is really, for its part, trying to sink the entire region into just an intractable war, and it's all a function of something known as the Brzezinski doctrine. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I mean, it's been standing U.S. policy, but it was not codified, but it was reified, academically with something called the Grand Chessboard. That was a book that Zbigniew Brzezinski, the late Zbigniew Brzezinski, published back in 1997. And it was a blueprint for the war on terror as it would have to emerge, and the purpose, that if the United States is going to remain top dog, it has to conquer the Eurasian continent, and with it the mineral resources, the hydrocarbon resources, the rare earth materials that are present in that region, and that these are all whether it's in the Middle East or whether it's in Ukraine or whether it's elsewhere, these are all installments, if you will, of that much larger U.S. strategy. And everybody is suffering. I mean, the U.S., Ukrainians, Palestinians, Israeli citizens alike. I mean, they are all victims.
They are all, and there will be no winners. But United States, you think United States is doing enough to stop the war? Because look, most of the weaponry used in Israel to attack the other side is American made. Are they doing enough?
The United States, no, on the contrary. This administration, if anything, is escalating it because the news broke just yesterday that the U.S. is arming Israel with additional weaponry, putting additional troops in Israel for the purpose of ostensibly defending itself against an Iranian attack. But again, it's all an escalation because this is precisely what the West wants. I mean, again, these are all components of that Brzezinski doctrine, the Mackinderist Brzezinski doctrine. It derives, well, I'm getting a little too far ahead of myself here, but the Mackinderist, Sir Halford Mackinder, not even the theory, but the reality as far as the ruling class is concerned, that the Eurasian continent must be conquered. And again, these are all installments, components of that.
Since we are talking about war, let's move to a different continent and talk about Ukraine and Russia conflict. Do you see an end to it? Trump said that if he happens to win, that in less than 24 hours, even before he becomes president, he takes oath, he will have this done. How you think you would have this done, and what's
well, I don't think that's possible, because what we have to remember, matters of war and peace, irrespective of whether we're referring to the Middle East, Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, these are what we call systemic or structural issues, and they do not change materially from one occupant of the White House to the next. They don't. I mean, these are structural. And Trump can say anything he wants. He's claiming that he'll end the war in a matter of hours, and this is coming out of the mouth of the same man who's claiming that Haitians are eating house pets in Ohio. So I mean, he can say anything he wants, but I mean, these things are just not realistic. They are structural in nature. I mean, let's just look at the foreign policies of Obama and his predecessor, George W. Bush, or we can even go farther back. Can one detect a difference in the foreign policies of Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon? I mean, we're talking wholesale slaughter of Southeast Asia under both administrations. So it's, again, these are structural. They don't differ materially. They might differ tactically or programmatically from one presidency or one political party to the next, but this is a structural issue. Now, do I see an end? Sure, but it's not an end, that is to say, an end to the war in Ukraine. It's not an end that any one of us would want to contemplate, because this is very dangerous. Because the war on terror, as it has been known, which began after 9/11 and beginning with the invasion of Afghanistan, in 2018, that graduated to a new doctrine, great power competition, great power conflict. Now it is no longer asymmetric warfare, looking for a bin Laden, in this case in Afghanistan, even though he was in Pakistan, or Saddam Hussein. Now it is direct conflict with Russia and China, and reducing both to some kind of third world status. I mean, the expectation is that Russia can be broken up into as many tiny little statelets, and that's not going to happen for two reasons. Number one, Russia is intensely nationalistic, as is China, and they also have something called, what do we call those things again? Oh yeah, nuclear weapons.
No, oh.
Yeah, so this is a very dangerous proposition. So I don't know, when you ask is there any end, I mean, the U.S., for its part, has not demonstrated any serious commitment or eagerness to diplomacy. And in the case of Trump claiming that he'll end this war in no time flat, or whether it's matters of hours or days, I don't see how.
Phone call. You end the war with the phone call.
Yeah, you end war with a phone call, but again, we have to consider two things. Again, this is structural and systemic, and it's not anything that one single occupant of the White House has any real control over, no matter that he or she is commander-in-chief. But also, it's, in the case of Trump in particular, and I hate, even to make this into too much of a partisan issue, because again, these issues are structural more than they are partisan. But Trump is making all sorts of pseudo-populist appeals to the working class, and there is precedent for that also. Talking Germany in the 1930s, anyway. So it's, I think it is a very serious misapprehension that Trump is, committed to peace, and he is seen, even by some on the political left, as two things: as a political outsider who somehow made this miraculous end run around the establishment and became president, but that's false on its face, number one, and that he's this great statesman for peace, which is equally ludicrous, because after all, wasn't it Trump who, before the United Nations General Assembly, threatened to destroy North Korea? Now, these are not the words of a statesman for peace. And then, of course, what happened in Iran 2 years ago, the bombing that eliminated that military commander. I mean, the entire premise that he's committed to peace is just, it's just absurd.
Now, Professor, Yonkers Voice has a very large followers in multiple pages that we have, and one of the questions that often comes to us is your life better now than it was 4 or 6 years ago? Sometimes I tell people that maybe the economy was better back then, but the reason why it was better back then when Trump was around was because of how the economy was left to him from the man before him. I could be wrong, but this is about you, how you see things. What is your take on that?
Well, I mean, if I'm going to speak just for myself, yes, my life is better now than it was 4 years ago, but I mean, these are functions of the economy and the various ramifications of the economy, and how there are just so many, I mean, just incomprehensible vicissitudes of the economy that it's really not something that can be attributed to one or another president of the United States. So the question itself is, is your life better now than it was when so-and-so was president? The question itself is overly simplistic. So that's really all I can say to that. But I mean, if I had to speak for my own personal situation as far as how I'm doing, yes, it's better now than it was, but I don't speak for everyone. I obviously can't speak for everyone, but I think the question itself just oversimplifies national politics, really, and economics.
We have maybe around 20 days before November 5th. Early voting already started. What is your forecast for the results? And how you think it will be accepted? I know if somebody wins, they will have no issues accepting it. But if that person loses, will it be rigged, sir?
Well, I think we're looking at a really precarious set of circumstances, irrespective of the outcome or who should eventuate as the winner or the loser because, well, first of all, the Trump syndicate, if I may call them that, maybe that's, well, anyway, it's really not too much to conclude that they are not going to accept an unfavorable outcome, I mean, even to the point of suggesting that there's going to be a bloodbath. We heard that characterization. But if Trump should win, whether fair and square or otherwise, then there's going to be a wave of recrimination and seeking to avenge everything that has happened over the last 4 years and his 2 impeachments and his criminal indictments. So it could be, it's likely to be, that is to say, in my view, ugly no matter the outcome. But as to what the electoral result is going to be, I think at this point it is so close that it's what's probably you're going to have an electoral college winner, but not necessarily a popular vote winner. And again, that could apply to either side. It's really,
it could go either way, right?
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. But it's
Well, Professor, before we start the interview, you were giving us a few pointers about Yonkers, interesting points about Park Hill, Getty Square. I'm sure things that a lot of people from Yonkers have no idea. I have no idea. Okay. So just...
Oh, okay. Well, Park Hill, okay, and Getty Square are, believe it or not, named for the same person, Robert Park Hill Getty, who, from what I've read, interestingly enough, was an abolitionist. But yes, Park Hill Avenue, Getty Square, named for the same person. What else can
What street that was named after your father?
Oh, okay. That was, well, let me just give you some context here. My father ran for mayor of this city in 1983, and he served on the Yonkers Planning Board when Alfred Del Bella was mayor, and then when Jerry Lohr became mayor, my father was appointed to the Board of Assessment Review, and my father was a teacher in the Yonkers school system, and a section of Park Avenue was dedicated to him. Somewhere along the line, the sign was taken down, but it was Park Avenue from Ashburton to approximately Flag Street, right alongside the former Yonkers General Hospital, which incidentally is where my father and I were both born. I believe it's part of St. John's now, if I'm not mistaken. I don't get up that way too often, but let's see, what else can we...
Professor, you've been living in Yonkers your entire life, basically?
Yeah, save for a few years living out of town, but one could say that I'm lifelong.
How much has Yonkers changed through your years? And was it for the better?
Oh, I think for the better. I mean, it's really the tragic desegregation turmoil is quite behind us now, and with it the attendant bad publicity. And if I can give a shout out to the mayor of Yonkers, Mike Spano, I mean, he's just done a tremendous job. He and the city council. I mean, Yonkers is coming back. Let me just put it that way. But again, to the city council and to Mayor Mike Spano,
thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Yes.
Thumbs up.
Yes.
What about crime in Yonkers? Do you feel that crime is going down or is going up? The mayor keeps saying that crime is going down. Some people say, well, it depends on the classification of the crime. But what is your personal opinion?
Okay.
You don't speak on behalf of no one, just your opinion.
Okay. It's going down, but I think also statistically, now I'm speaking in terms of the entire U.S., a small percentage, whether it's 10%, 15%, of reported crime is violent, and an even smaller percent results in death. But those types of crime are perhaps given disproportionate news reportage because of their seriousness and perhaps because of their relative rarity. Most crime, and I would return to the immigration issue to make this point also, that most crimes are committed out of economic desperation. And to anyone who is concerned that the migrants are bringing crime or that they are themselves criminals, I would remind everyone that most crimes are committed out of economic desperation, and this is no more true of migrants than of their U.S. counterparts. But in any case, my personal sense is that crime is down in Yonkers. I mean, I haven't seen or read specific statistics, but let's also consider that most reported crime is not violent. It's most committed out of economic desperation. We might hear more about a murder or a hit and run because of the seriousness, first of all, but because they are rare relative to crimes of economic desperation.
Well, Professor, 1 hour. It feels like we just started.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And again, I thank Yonkers Voice, Rue, thank you. Prince, thank you for this opportunity.
And guys, don't forget to share this interview, blast it, put it on your page, groups that you belong. This is information, and information is power. If you're going to talk about issues, make sure that you understand the root cause of those issues, and don't just take bullet lines from somebody else's speech and make a big deal out of it without understanding what you're talking about. Yes, immigration is a problem. Yes, we need a better border security. We need a better system. But the problem is not what you think. The problem is much deeper than that.
Much.
Much, much
Yes.
deeper.
Yeah, again, we have to take a holistic approach. We need to look at the issues at their sources rather than just address symptomatic symptomatic problems or resultant problems, but the issues at their sources. We have to take a holistic view. And again, I tried to bring this to light when I ran for Congress 12 years ago. So all we can do is just educate.
That's all we can do. And that's really the point of this interview, is to educate, to give information, so they have more food for thought, so they can see things from a different point of view and understand the full problem before they speak or offer suggestions.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yonkers Voice, guys, is not my voice. Yonkers Voice is the platform where your voice can be heard. If you have an interesting or an important issue that you want to bring to light, please email us at yv@yonkersvoice.com. Let us know what it is that you want to talk about, and then we take it from there. Thank you, Professor.
Oh, thank you very much.
I appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure.
Hopefully we'll make this again, maybe with a different subject, and we will talk. And
absolutely, I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Until next time.